Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Haley Mitchell-Haugen. I am the founding editor of the quarterly poetry journal, Sheila-Na-Gig Online, entering our 10th year this fall, and Sheila-Na-Gig Editions with over 50 books published to date, and the nonprofit arts organization, Sheila-Na-Gig Inc., striving to uplift new and established writers and poets everywhere in venues like Spoken and Heard. I hope you'll check us out at Sheila-Na-Gig-blog.com, where I encourage you to read our newest issue of the journal online, and of course, to support our authors by buying their books. It's absolutely my honor tonight to offer the platform for Kari Gunter-Seymour's program, Spoken and Heard. To many, our host needs no introduction, but for those of you who don't know Kari, Kari Gunter-Seymour is our Poet Laureate of the state of Ohio and the author of 3 award-winning collections of poetry, including her latest, Dirt Songs from Eastover Press in 2024, and A Place So Deep Inside America, It Can't Be Seen from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions, and winner of the Ohio Poet of the Year Award in 2020. Kari is the executive director of the Women of Appalachia Project and editor of its anthology series, Women Speak. Her work has been featured in American Book Review, Poem a Day, World Literature Today, the New York Times, and many other places. So welcome, Kari. It's great to be back here with you at Spoken and Heard.
Hey, Haley, thank you so much. And I am so grateful to you and the wonderful Sheila-Na-Gig, who has agreed to broadcast our events this spring and fall. And as always, a huge thank you goes out to the Ohio Arts Council for sponsoring the 2025 season of Spoken and Heard. And of course, I want to welcome our audience, those of you with us here this evening, and those of you who will stream us later on social media and YouTube. Tonight is our last event for the spring season, and oh boy, we're in for sure a treat. I'm so excited. I'm hosting Appalachian's own poet and novelist, Willie Carver Jr., and poet and professional poker player, Katie Dozier. I couldn't be more excited. We will do a short Q&A after the readings for those of you with us tonight, so please jot down your questions and be ready to enter them in the chat at the end of the readings, and we will monitor that. So let's begin. Willie Carver Jr. is a minoritized youth advocate, Kentucky Teacher of the Year, and the author of Gay Poems for Red States, which is a Stonewall, American Library Association, Read Appalachia, Whirlpool, and Book Riot award-winning collection, which was also shortlisted for the 2024 Judy Gaines Young Book Award. His novel, Tore All to Pieces, will be published in 2026 by the University Press of Kentucky. His advocacy story has been featured across U.S. media, including ABC, CBS, The Washington Post, and Good Morning America. His advocacy has led him to engage President Biden and to testify before the United States Congressional Committee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. Wow. Thank you, Willie. Thank you so much for all of that. Willie's writing has been published in Appalachian Journal, Southern Humanities Review, Young Ravens Review, Another Chicago, Harbor Review, Smoky Blue Literary Magazine, Miracle Monocle, Good River Review, Salvation South, and Gay and Lesbian Review worldwide. Willie believes everyone deserves to feel that they matter. You can find Gay Poems for Red States at the University Press of Kentucky, and that's just www.kentuckypress.com. A huge, huge heartfelt welcome to you, Willie.
Oh, Kari, thank you all who are here to hear some poetry from a big gay hillbilly and from some not big gay hillbillies. And thank you for this invitation. I really appreciate it. I want to start with, if I can, a poem that's tied to Tim Hortons, the one in Ashland, as a matter of fact. I just finished a novel yesterday, and for some reason, this Tim Hortons just keeps coming back into my life. So to exercise that, I want to share this poem. Salvation South originally published it, and it's called To My Schoolmate and Friend, Amanda Reynolds, Who Should Be Alive. My hands were heavy, wrappers, fountain cups, napkins from the floorboard, a pop can, when I saw you with a man on my road trip break, softly steeping in the amber broth of sunlight, at the Tim Hortons off I-64 in Ashland, Kentucky. Your hair the same motor oil blonde, screaming itself out of dark roots, your goofy smile wound up tight, an uneven leftward climb up your face, as your laughing smoothed its worry, even when it called up wrinkles. Joy flickered across my back. You had found a man who took you to donuts on a Tuesday afternoon and who knew how to find your crooked little grin. I wanted to say hello. Bumped a wood block trash can lid, car garbage dripping downwards. When I remembered you were dead, an overdose. Your 20-year-old blonde hair, now 20 years numb to growth or change, no longer coiling away from the mousy brown genetics, the strange twists of your mouth stretched into somber small town funeral expression. I fell by accident onto your powder blue casket when I tried to find my mammoth service. You had the smallest room at Nelson and Fraser, just one of 4 funerals on Friday night. But you know these hills have long been rich with the short-lived bodies of poor dead people. I smiled at the not you woman, nodded my head at the sunshine and donuts, at the man with coffee who listened to her under her crooked smirk till it felt safe to ascend. And I prayed for them, that their talking and their coffee and their sunshine and their donuts know another 20 years of sunlight. I've been thinking, I think, a lot lately about time, what time can do, how time works. I've got a really good friend who has a degenerative brain disease. And probably that's why I'm writing about time for the last couple of years, and why it's specifically standing out today. This isn't about that friend, it's about my grandmother-in-law, but I've been thinking about her. I would like to share this. It's called Come Stay. For Sarah McElroy, called Catherine, my grandmother-in-law, who taught me defiance. Remember how for at least 6 months before you died, you re-looped through themselves the same 2 stories, like a toddling child who had just found new words. You kept hovering just so about your body and learned more about this tired world, even as you were leaving it. When a pretty little girl, not tall like you, refused to descend, a slide, and a now dead teacher called your recess to its end. And up there, lathered in sun, rather than lose your turn to her, smirking blue hair ribbons and carousel of curls, you bit the softness of her shoulder, melting under the unforgiven weight of your concrete tomboy 8-year-old teeth, and triumphant, you took your turn against all their wishes, that you grow up to be a woman who only knew how to say yes, until the day your husband would tell you for the last time no, because he didn't want your family staying the night in his home in 1973 that you reminded him in 1973 you had made for him, and you flung dishes and cups and glasses until they shattered and you were whole, and you called your brother and said, "Come, stay." If I can share one more thing before I start reading from Gay Poems for Red States. I recently had a poem published in Southern Humanities Review, which I'm so excited about. And it's about a family member. And so I tried to send it to that family member's mother through one vehicle, and got a phone call from her and said, well, they said they lost it. And then I tried to send it through another vehicle, and again, it got lost. So I don't know if there's just a real hankering for poetry down in Floyd County. But I'm gonna have to try a third time to get this poem to her mother. This is called No Smoking. To Ethel Marie Dotson Spurlock Hunter, my kin. I could never figure out if you were my second cousin or third or something else, because the hills wallered facts like that until they thickened the air with warmth, which we needed because it was 1995 or 1996 and the bus only stopped once in the bottom. So 6 or 7 houses or trailers worth of kids, all second or third cousins or something else, would wait for the bus in your house in the morning in the heat of your gas stove. You would turn on just so we would come in and be somewhere other than the thin, cold space between the houses or the trailers and the creek. And you always wore a big pink nightgown and smoked long white cigarettes that sighed exhaustion or care across the air, freeing itself from the stove. And that morning, I looked in your fish tank at its guppies or its goldfish swirling around with each other and saw a porcelain sign that read no smoking. And I laughed at the absurdity of it and told you that I loved that sign. And you didn't flinch, just put your cigarette in your left hand and then immersed your arm into the waters and pulled it up. And even when I tried to protest, you said, if ever I have anything, then you have it too, because we're family and I love you. And it was just a little sign, and it's been 28 or 29 years, but I can't tell you how many times in 28 or 29 years the thin, cold space in front of the houses or trailers expanded into darkness and stood between me and the sky or me and the creek, no matter how far away I was. And then that pink sleeve rolls, and in comes your arm and your hand, and I'm held and I am pulled from the waters and I am given in love. And even though you are now dead, the heat of the gas stove is there to dry the cold. I'd like to start reading from Gay Poems for Red States. I'd like to give a small introduction to this book. I was Teacher of the Year in the state of Kentucky in the year 2022, which was a wholly unraveling of everything good and bad in my life because it was so utterly unexpected. I did not have a good relationship with my administration and frankly fought for my students every day that I went into the building. That was my role in life. And when I found out that I was nominated, my students laughed at me and because it seemed ridiculous. And one of them actually said, yeah, like they're going to let some big gay hillbilly be Teacher of the Year. And we all laughed because it was funny. But that night I kept thinking about her words. And that kid was a big gay hillbilly. And I thought, she's already decided that she's never going to be Teacher of the Year, that there are limits to what the world will offer her. So I made it a point to invite those students to fill that application out with me and to let them think not only that I was going to win, but to make sure they were a part of that experience so that they could feel what it was like to have hope. And it was them and the work that they did that caused me to win. It was them shining on that application. So suddenly there's a big gay Teacher of the Year in a very conservative state. And very quickly, dark things began to happen. People showed up out of the woodwork and started harassing me, threatening me, and then threatening my students. In the worst part of it, it was death threats against teenagers. I was begging my school to do something and ended up in an email to my superintendent starting a poem. It poured from me, bled from me, whatever verb you want to use to say that a little boy that I used to be came through my fingertips to speak to me. And this poem actually began in an angry email to my superintendent. It's called Minnie Mouse Toy. Would you like a Hot Wheel or a Barbie, sir? The words float like ghosts in front of me when I speak them, frozen by the winter air, whipping in through the drive-through window. Boy's toy, gruff. No, just boys and toy. 2 words. Okay, we have Hot Wheels and Barbies. No wonder you work at McDonald's, you idiot. Idiot. I'm 5 again. My mother's knee-length interstate cold denim coat is a traveling home. And when I stand close enough, I smell floor cleaner, cigarette smoke, minty gum, home. The bright lights of McDonald's are a circus of plastic shining glee, and my tiny heart twists with such rapture that I feel dizzy and hug the clouds of home that are her coat. My mom clears her throat. Could I get a Happy Meal with the Minnie Mouse car? The words are soft like the quilted lining of her coat, and each petal of a word builds a flower of please. The cashier hammers a few buttons and yips our order into a thin microphone, but then her eyes grab me and drag me from the coat. They look me up and down and tug at my shirt. I pull the coat closer until I'm surrounded by the smoke and gum and cleaner and can feel the blankets on my bed piled around me. But I hear her through the imaginary walls as she hands the boxed meal to my mother. You know you're going to ruin him. The words lodge themselves into the foundation of the imaginary home. It dissolves. And suddenly, I'm just a boy near a coat in a bright place with nowhere to hide. She says, thank you, but the flowers are dead and they fall fast to the ground. My mother carries the cartoon-colored box to the booth, drops a pack of menthols on the gleaming tabletop, and gently directs the toy car to the side of the cigarette box as she lights up a cigarette, exhales a whispering cobalt storm cloud of mint and worry, and then fights gravity to pull the edges of her lips into a smile. Go ahead and play, Bubby. We can eat after Mommy smokes. She tries to ash her cigarette. I try to play. The toy car is as heavy as her smile, and like the smoke, I know the weight of it is my fault. And unlike the smoke, I can't make her feel better. The plastic is too thick, and the paint on Minnie's pink hair bow looks like my little baby cousin's cheeks that change from white to red while she screams, crying, and her mom begs her to stop. I look to my mother's face. I pull myself up from the memory. I'm 16. I'm in a drive-through. And the word idiot is snowing on me. Sir, we have 2 toys, Barbie and Hot Wheels. He drives away. I keep standing. I'll read just a few more. You would think as many times as I've done this, I would remember page numbers, but I never do. My mom, strangely enough, after she read Gay Poems for Red States for the first time, kept apologizing to me. And I didn't understand because everyone who's read this has said, your mom is such an angel, your mom is such a hero. But even her apology reminds me just how much weight mothers carry, and just how hard mothers sometimes have to work to try to make things perfect. And sometimes they're making things perfect and they don't even understand what the problems are or what the world is. Sometimes they don't even have words for the things that they want to talk about. This is called Cornmeal and Water Pancakes. My older brother never seemed to notice things unless he was pointing a gun at them. He could hit a pop can from all the way across the yard, even if the sun was making our fingertips tingle and the cold was barking into our eyes from above the hill line and cartoons were on inside the trailer. I could never make any shot. because there were four-leaf clovers and sparkling zebra rocks telling wild stories to each other at the rusty feet of the railroad tracks. Who could pay attention to a pop can or a BB gun with all that beautiful racket? My mother always paid attention to us. She told us to come in out of the cold for breakfast, but her real reason was my sister had just woke up. And she didn't want her to shoot any kind of guns since she was too little to spell 3-count words. And she still looked out the window when the Easter Bunny was out hiding eggs. She was also so small that she squeaked when she said, "I wish we could have real pancakes." And a warmer world of imaginary pancakes rose from behind her eyes, a balm to our cold, numbed faces that etched a rune into my mother's heart. Well, we ain't got pancake mix, butter, flour, eggs, or syrup, but hillbillies don't need all that stuff. Let's make them extra special this morning. The sunshine stretching through the polyester lace curtains yawned its buttery warmth across the barren kitchen in what was surely a magic spell to make us remember the moment. Mom lay only the paper cornmeal and sugar sacks from the cabinet firmly on the countertop and told us we could make pancakes with just 2 ingredients. Using the oldest type of enchantment, she loved the cornmeal and water with her hands until it agreed to stay together as she spread it like a blanket across the unoiled skillet. Once, twice, thrice, the fine ground corn batter agreed against all laws of physics to softly brown and turn over in the dry heat. She boiled water from the tap, and when the steam rose, to sing wispy charms as it escaped the water to release itself into the sunshine, she held up the bag of sugar like a foundling, and the crystal powder drizzled out in swirls of cotton sand that thickened into splashing amber sorghum under her wizardry. Plate clank, steam hum, fork clink, syrup trickle, and syrup seep. Me, my brother, and my sister devoured the cornmeal and water pancakes, the corn grain tufts wearing mud puddles of sweetness, until bellies full, we all went back outside to play. I was scratching a make-believe city scene into the dirt when my brother broke in to get my attention. "Hey," he said, kicking a rock across the pretend street and nearly hitting the invisible school I had imagined there. "You ever notice that Mom never eats when we do?" My older brother's walnut eyes were obscured by overgrown brown hair and steadily focused on the toe of his cracked boot. And I had never realized how much more than pop cans they could see. I'd like to read 2 more poems. Did a speaking event in Moorhead 2 days ago with the philanthropic organization. And one of the things that really occurred to me as I was talking is that we keep having conversations about LGBTQ people without having conversations about LGBTQ youth. And you cannot have conversations about LGBTQ inclusion or diversity without talking about LGBTQ youth, because they are the most vulnerable, because they have the least rights, and because they exist. So I want to read this for every LGBTQ youth or person who hasn't considered them. It's called First Crush. The thing I like most about Brandon was that he didn't just wear a shirt, and he didn't just wear a sweater. He wore both. His enthusiastic collars proudly grew out from under his sweaters like cotton walls of radiating emotion. Yellow through blue, green through brown, white through red, Brandon was the first art I saw that was able to teach me just by looking that when the right things were meant to be together, beauty was inevitable. We were both in the fast reader group. Mrs. Colliver just called us the Bluebird group, but even first graders knew what it meant. We got to choose who read next after we finished our sentence, an out loud group reading. And once, Brandon chose my name. Immediately, I fell into a pastel dream in which we would sail to a seagull adorned beach and build sandcastles to live in and have enough money to buy me shirts and sweaters too, even though I knew he would lend me his. Brandon's toast-colored hair was always neatly trimmed, and his shoes, though white like mine, were whiter, like the blank pages of a coloring book that I wanted to color in all by myself. One day, my brother, sister, and me had to change schools because we didn't have electricity in the trailer we lived in. We never went back. I still think about Mrs. Colliver's class that I had to leave. I don't remember where I sat in class or the number of kids who sat with me. I don't remember what we were reading in class, but I do remember the day Brandon chose me to read it. And on that day, in that moment, my shoes were as bright as his. One thing about that poem is it's the one I remember most when I was first getting editorial critiques. There was kind of this refrain that I saw a lot, which usually means you should listen to it, that I was solving the poem and stating out loud exactly what it meant right there at the end. And maybe I could leave more to the reader, but I knew that I was going to have a lot of readers who were so unsure about love because they had not been told enough that it mattered and that they mattered, that I didn't want to leave anything to interpretation. So I kept that to last stanza and then a lot of other last stanzas. I'll read one more. I think that'll get us to 25. This is called Waiting for God. I was excited and nervous to be baptized because I thought it would make me brand new, like a toy still tied up and glued to its packaging, and also keep me from going to hell. In the 3 days until my baptism, I still had 5th grade homework. And on a Thursday evening, salted thick with dogwood and cool spring air, my mom joined me. We stretched out onto the tired hood of her car under the Gregorian hum of a crackling housing project parking lot streetlight so that I could color in the phases of the moon with a pencil. She brought out a blanket and even let me sip some weak black coffee. Do you think God will wait till Sunday before the end of the world? What if he came tonight and I went to hell? She brought the cover around my shoulders and her frayed and overworked arms anointed the bargain bin blanket with the power to embrace me. She gestured upwards. The same God that put them stars in the sky didn't do it so he could send you to hell. He holds them up for a reason. He'll wait on you. The dark sky became an aquarium of sparks and love, and every fish had a name. Those 3 days stretched into 3 decades, and despite the baptism, preachers and lawmakers and winners and losers and lovers and haters and neighbors with tongues and arms hot like red irons would over and over again hold my head underwater, hoping that the metal hiss of steam would mock me as I drowned. But with each plunge under, the darkness of the water would part, and fish made of stardust would lay hands on me and dance in the spirit. Thank you all so very much.
Oh my goodness, Willie. I didn't think you could manage it, but you have surpassed everything I thought might occur here. I mean, just so excellent, so beautiful, and so devastating, your poetry, which is just so perfect. And I just really want to thank you for your incredible ability to open yourself up like that and have so much love to give to so many, and to stand up and advocate for us all, and to insist on teaching us all, so that we can have a better understanding. So thank you so much on just so many levels, so many thank yous. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored. I really am. Thank you.
I'm honored. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, we've got to move forward here, folks. We have yet another reader. This is going to be difficult. Okay, so Katie Dozier's love of poetry first bloomed as a child. She memorized Robert Frost sitting on a tree stump and bathed in Edgar Allan Poe as an adolescent. While studying words at Florida State University, KHD also played with chips and became a professional poker player. She's passionate about encouraging others to discover and share contemporary poetry through her X account at Katie_Dozier, her Substack, and on NFTs. KHD is the author of Watering Can, and she co-authored Hot Pink Moon with her husband, Timothy Green. She hosts the weekly podcast, The Poetry Space, is the haiku editor for One Art, and an editor at Rattle Magazine. And you can find Hot Pink Moon at Amazon. A huge welcome, Katie. I'm just so pleased and happy and over the moon to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And Haley, thank you for hosting this whole event. And I have to say, Willie, I loved your reading. I got your book and I took it where I live in Texas in a cafe and opened your book up and was so proud to be reading it. I also have to say that I usually skip the introduction in books, but after your introduction in that book, I will never skip an introduction again because it was so compelling right even before we got into the poems. So thank you. And thank you so much for reading and everything, and it was really wonderful to get to meet you in that way. So I also feel connected to Willie because I grew up partially in Kentucky, so I feel very much like I'm back in that world right now, which is a very happy place for me that I love spending time in. And what I want to talk about and focus on tonight is this concept of gratitude. Gratitude is what really inspires me about poetry. It's what brings me into poetry and to sharing with everyone. I'm also really grateful that I see so many of my friends in the audience tonight, even my NFT homie over there, George Festad is here, and a lot of people who regularly share their poems on the Rattlecast prompt lines as well. And I see my mom, and I think the weird phone number is my dad. So hello to you all too. So thanks so much for being here. And I'm really grateful for everyone being here to listen to me right now. So I want to start out by reading a few poems from Watering Can. So Watering Can was a project that I started. I did it in 2023 during National Poetry Month. I decided to write a poem every day and share it on social media. And then also by the end of the month, turn that collection into first an NFT, basically a digital book, and then I made it into a physical chapbook too, publishing it later on. So it was that I had to share the poem too, because I'm a big believer in sharing our poems and not hiding them away for fear of getting them published somewhere else, because I think the power of poetry is in community and in sharing it. So I'm going to start off with one that is partially inspired by a friend who's also here, who is Joe Barca. Joe Barca has been my friend in poetry for a long time, and he's always been cheering me on when I started to think about like, oh, maybe I could do a podcast, but that seems crazy. I don't know if I'm qualified to do a podcast. Joe's always the friend in my corner that's first to be there and say, no, you should do it. You should do it, Katie. So this poem's for him, and Mom, I'm sorry about the F-bomb. So prompt me. There's something about the willingness to write a poem about a Sasquatch playing pickleball that commits one to the game. Even when they tell me it's insane, I can't help but slam that ball, riddled with holes, back over the net. Who cares that half the time it doesn't even make it to the other side? So many stanzas caught in a droopy net, and yet I still hit too hard, rhyme too loud, and jam the fuck out of lines. My hot pink sneakers love nothing more than to squeak sonnets, and when I serve a ball way beyond the chain link fence, I can't help but bounce with unprompted suspense. So I will also happily note that my pickleball game has improved from this point a couple years ago. So that's another thing that is on the upswing. Next, I'm going to read a poem that's kind of about, I'm obsessed with this idea of writing in the flow state. The flow state feels extremely spiritual to me when we get into it and you're just in the zone and all you have are these words. Kind of like Willie was talking about, that brilliant poem of his started just in an email to his superintendent, which is amazing. And I imagine he was very much in the flow state and this thing coming out of you that's bigger than yourself somehow. So this is, if we followed the idea of just letting everything that comes into our mind and allowed ourselves to write it down. If every thought were invited. Dear sir or madam, I cordially invite you to attend a ball so dastardly that it is difficult to comprehend. There will be champagne, of course, good fellows. Please wear a top hat on your big toe, Macarena, do-si-do. But beware the bouncers, your evil thoughts. You sneak in cloaked, clutching a bouquet of forget-me-nots. Back, back, I say, do not enter here, where I grow wildflowers on the ceiling. It's difficult enough to dance without worrying about your meaning. Saturn appears like a disco ball. Staircases become rainbow slides. When, shoeless, I fall, then rise, I realize my mind is just a bouncy castle, so I welcome all inside. And I think that gets to me too, the gratitude for silly things, right? And this idea that we can incorporate ridiculous things into our poetry. It doesn't have to be limited, you know, of course, as we know, to serious things, and finding gratitude for bouncy castles. I have my daughters to thank for a lot of the more ridiculous images I think I come up with, because the world of little girls is pretty bright. So that's wonderful as well. Okay, moving on. And more on the concept of gratitude too. I love just going outside. And right now, Tim and I moved into a house a few months ago where it has a beautiful yard. And I'm not a gardener, which makes me sad because I think gardening's amazing, but I do not have a green thumb, even though green is now my last name. So I really have no excuse. But I love going outside, and it really grounds me and very often makes its way into my poems. On the count of too much rain. A congress of magnolia trees dialed in, voted not to bloom again this spring. The creek wrapped around her roots. Humanitarian curves. Birds are flutes. How these ripples soar as the stones stir. See, all I want is one surge more. A Douglas fir glares overhead, but this stream presses onwards. There is never enough time to stop for chords of love or listen to the babble of a sudden longing. And these branches should hold a basket of blooms. Imagine green leaves full of little white moons. And in the fog of this humid spring at midnight, bend one down for me, nestled in moonlight, a bee. And this next poem I'm going to read is in honor of Dick Westheimer, who's here. Dick Westheimer hosted my first ever in-person poetry reading, which was in Kentucky, I'm happy to say. And I remember having a Zoom with him before because I was like super nervous, and him encouraging me to really read this one salaciously. I don't know if I can quite read it as Dick requested, but I'll do my best. Bake sale. My body is a pound cake, blonde, baked inside a bundt pan. The drizzle of lemon icing cuts the richness of my thighs, the crumbs of youth still clinging to the sides. My brain is a banana nut muffin. A Brit once called it stodgy, an American too dense, but walnuts must be toasted first to carry the depth of scent. Eat me with chai tea, all too often given free. My heart is a plate of cookies with scorched sides, but the chocolate chips are still gooey underneath the sea of rainbow sprinkles splashed on by my daughter's glee. Which also is taking me back to the experience I had this year of selling Girl Scout cookies for the first time with my oldest, and that was a whole poem in and of itself that I need to write. So now we're going to move on to the title poem. This is Watering Can. And this happens to be, you know, what I love about searching for gratitude is not just, you know, it's easy to be grateful for flowers, you know, if we just stop and look and things like that. But I think as we deepen our own practice of gratitude, one thing that poetry has taught me is finding the beauty in difficult moments too, because of course, in difficult moments, we still have, you know, our thankfulness of being alive and the many things. And I was thinking about this too, because Tim interviewed Lee Young Lee on the Rattlecast, and he was talking about how we aren't fully alive unless we're aware of our own death. And so I really think that having that constantly in our mind really is a wonderful thing. It doesn't have to be a dark thing for us. So this is Watering Can. I comb this garden for tomatoes that catch me like a butterfly in a child's net. How could anything be quite so red, so full of juice? From one bite, I remember all the fruit. How I ate every pineapple in a bid to ripen, to make my late babies come. And when I was so done, paid for fruit pre-sliced. Neat in boxes, yellow sun, as if life would always be so nice. Today, our old tuxedo cat died. But chirps spring out from the backyard. My little girl sings to the succulents, watering them from a can. A softer pour than ever before. Now she understands. So that was really, and with the cat dying and everything, it was my oldest daughter's first experience, with death. And at the time too, and I don't know if I would have felt this way without poetry when seeing, your daughter devastated for the first time, but how this was a gift too in passing and her learning how to deal with loss and how that was beautiful. So, and then the next poem, this is a sequel, which is my way of referring to an after poem that's intensely within the world of the source poem. So this is written after Maggie Smith's Good Bones. Even better ligaments. Life is long, though I keep this from my daughters. Life is long, and I've stretched mine in a million ways that threaten to snap me, though I'll keep this from my daughters. Life is long, though my eldest doesn't believe it when I tell her to put on her tutu faster. As I pull her hair into a bun, she asks, "Why are we never running early?" Pirouetting through the rooms of this new house, the girl's house, the one we used to only dream about, life is long, but have you noticed how, here, it smells like pumpkin pie spice instead of that anger I could never quite bake nice? In every silence, I think of the old coldness and find a knitted throw to wrap myself inside. In every silence, I know that just one pillar can hold up a whole home. To sell them the world, I bought the world myself, and we make this place beautiful. So now I'm going to move on in the world of, to anyone who knows me's not going to be surprised to hear me bring up haiku right now. I think I should wear it on a shirt. It would save time because I'm talking about haiku so much. The reason I love haiku so much, first of all, I only found out a few years ago that haiku is not as we learned in school. It is not a syllabic form of 5, 7, 5 syllables. That's just, anything you can fit into that as a micropoem. What's exciting is that it's actually a whole lot more than that. I think that I have to quote my husband here because unfortunately he beat me to a much better definition of haiku that I've been able to come up with or heard from anyone else, which is 2 worlds in 1 breath. So you have these 2 distinct worlds and there's a cut between the 2 worlds where you get this intense burst, ideally, of a metaphor that you see the connection so clearly between these 2 opposing entities that you wouldn't have thought of really before. And so that's part of why I love haiku, because it's all about connection. And when you start a haiku practice, suddenly you see, hey, this is exactly like this, even though they seem completely at odds with each other. So I'm obsessed with haiku. And taking that even one step further, we get into haibun. So if you haven't heard of haibun, they are just a form of poetry that is the title. Usually it's traditionally referred to as like a prose poem, though as we'll see, it does not have to be a prose poem. And then a haiku usually at the end. But again, of course, with poetry, there are a million ways to do this. But it's all about making big leaps between things. And that's my favorite part of poetry, basically, too, is the big movement between things and the ability to encapsulate sometimes an entire world in only a few lines. So I'm going to move on to Hot Pink Moon, which is the book that I wrote with Tim. It's so hard to keep track of years for me, which is rough. I should be able to. But in 2024, during National Poetry Month, it was 3 days before April was about to start. And I was like, oh, I really want to do another project because it was so fun to write a poem a day and do a chapbook, in just a month. And Tim came up with this idea, which I still don't understand how he just came up with it so fast, but he did because he's Tim. So it was to create a haibun crown. So what that means is that I wrote the day 1 poem, and that has a haiku. And then the next day, Tim writes a poem, and he has to take the words from my haiku and put it into the body of his poem. And then at the end, on day 30, he writes the haiku based on the body of my first poem so that they link together in a crown, kind of inspired by a sonnet crown, but obviously we're talking about Haibun. So that's the way that works. And it's a really, really fun process. And Haibun has its roots as a Japanese form that was started by Basho, and it was originally a kind of like a travelogue. And it's exploded in popularity, I think, because people really realize the strength of being able to encapsulate a moment. And then what I'm always doing when I write the haiku is I'm like, okay, what is this really deeply about? What am I really getting to in this little bit? And it allows for a lot of movement, hopefully, or at least that is the goal. So I'm going to start out by reading this one that's called In the Round. So again, because I'm using because of how we're writing this crown, I take the words from Tim's haiku the day before, and then I put them into the body of the poem. So Tim's haiku was solar eclipse over the clouds for a spell. So I have to take those words. And what was going on at the time was this was the time of the solar eclipse that also was a big nothing burger outside of Houston where we live, even though it was supposed to be great. So we just sat out there, and then we got to hear about how amazing everybody else had a view, but we did not see it, but we wrote it into our poems instead. In the Round. Somehow we live our lives between eclipses, which is to say we've learned to play within ellipses. How the real story unfurls backstage, the ingenue so in love with the usher to continue another popcorn of a tale. Outside, a classic car horn blares us back to where, in pairs, lovers used to hold hands along the track, how grapes grab a vine. And there it is again, that curve before it all began. Just as a carousel turns, the world yearns to see the moon top hat the sun. How black and white is best broken up with red lips. And this is in the space before a spell's kiss, which, solar-powered, travels above the clouds. But it too must topple down, a raindrop for your mouth. Shattering, the fourth wall, a show of stars. So it's just coming back to me that the influence for that day was actually that I think I watched Shakespeare in Love, and Tim and I were apart. So you can always tell when one of us is traveling because you get a more intense love poem. So that's kind of the benefit of not being able to be together 100% of the time is we get these love poems. And it's really nice also to be able to go back and look and say, like, I know this was going on in my life. It's something you wouldn't necessarily remember without having the poem. So this poem is really goes out to my mom and dad who are here. One thing that was amazing about my childhood was we always had endless books. You know, just endless books. We had really old books, and like I don't know that I would have read Edgar Allan Poe if we didn't have like the creepiest, oldest, smelliest copy of Edgar Allan Poe. And I have no idea why we had that. But anyway, so Tim's haiku from the day before was the hours, a line of boxcars, empty or full. And I knew exactly where I was going to go with boxcars. Roots. I marched out to the forest, followed by a line of boxcar children books, having packed a pail full of hours. I ate an orange and then pulled wild onions from the earth, a mix of Georgia clay, sand, and dirt. How, even raw, the skinny ones smelled like soup. All the while reading, racing the empty sky, foraging for the bottom of the pile where I found frost alive. Every word, pages, every word. So that's a monoku, which is a little bit unusual, and it's more of an unusual haiku too, but there's a cut and two different meanings that you can take from that. So every word, pages, every word means that every word is recalling a previous version of the word that we've heard before, and then the pages where every word appears more literally too. And then I think I'm going to read one more from this book, and then I'm going to read a few newer ones. So this was my second to last, or this is my last poem in this book, and then Tim finished it up. Another thing that's really fun about collaborating on a poetry project where it's like one poet and then the next is that from my professional poker playing days, I'm highly competitive. So I would suggest too, like pairing with who you think the best poet in the world is, and then trying to outright them is very fun too as part of it. So this is After the Credits. Sometimes I pause to see this film between us, squint to imagine these miles as a perforated roll, unwinding on a continuous scroll. We are an ever unfurling vine. We left the negatives behind. We curl across the country, covering the earth with seeds. I was silent when I first saw you, confused a life with TV static, blank subtitles. But in your basket, you brought me a picnic of words. Where there once was only space, now watch these wildflowers stir. Laying the plot lines with you. So I did that in the form too of a sonnet. So you can really mix it up with Haibun, which is part of the fun too, or at least I do. I'm always a rule breaker too, so I have to get into that. So lastly, I'm going to read a couple poems from the fact that Tim and I have done this again this National Poetry Month. So, which was only a few weeks ago, it turns out, we went ahead and did another Haibun because we enjoyed it so much doing it last year. And this time it was extra fun because we are newlyweds. So we'd only been married, I think, a month at the time that we set out to write another book of poetry together. So that we don't know the title yet. So Tim's haiku on the day before I wrote this was, gypsum, calcite, quartz, we impress no one above ourselves. So that was a challenge for me. Sometimes you got to hit the Wikipedia in order to write your poems. It's a great excuse to learn more about the world. So this is Rarity. At the Natural History Museum, the Hall of Minerals is full of lit up rocks, showgirls twirling, each inside a different black box. The pink quartz would curtsy if she could unpeg herself. The green calcite crystal ladies swirl, tipsy in their column dresses, and gypsum is spotless in her see-through slip. Above their cases, descriptions that impress, one of the largest specimens by a roped-off wall of amethyst, but no confessions by those shards that are second best. We wander room to room, anthropomorphizing all, hoping to crack the geode of ourselves, mining the universe for you. And then I'm just going to close out with one more poem, I think, one more Haibun. And so this one was very late in the book, which means I just wrote it a few weeks ago. And part of the fun in writing a Haibun is getting to come up with the title at the end, because I view the title as kind of like the key that unlocks the leaps between the body of the poem and then the haiku. So it's wonderful to write Haibun because you get to experience the flow state when you're writing the body of the poem, and then I get the editor's fun brain of when I get into haiku mode and obsessing over every single little bit of language. Checking the Farmer's Almanac. Some roofs make me wish for a storm. Perhaps this is the humor of modern life, the urge to hear the rain rattle on the roof, but from inside, not wet, but warm, another mouth. Don't we just make a new womb from every room? This one has floral wallpaper climbing to the ceiling. Lingering vines always have a reason. Wildflowers in the median could be random, could be seeds sprayed out of the side of a truck last season. But either way, for us, look at all the wild irises. It has rained luck. Honeymoon, the sun that never sets. Thank you all so much for listening to me and letting me read some love poems to Tim, who's in the next room wearing my purple headphones. Hello, Tim.
Oh, Katie, that was so wonderful. And you know what? I just really want to thank you for taking the time along the way to, I'm going to use that word again, educate us about haiku and haibun, and you know that it's not the old rules of 5-7-5, and that we can break the rules. And because haiku is hard, it's very hard to write haiku. At least for me, it is. You know, because poetry is all about less words or more, but haiku is really about less words or more. You know, but I think to me, one of the most beautiful things was when you said what you love the most about poetry is the power of community. And I so much think that too, Katie. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because, I certainly don't know how I'm getting through this life without this community, that I've built. And you and Tim are a big part of that, actually. And Dick Westheimer and so many folks who are here tonight are somehow a part of my community or becoming so. So thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing your beautiful words. And I wanted you and Willie both to come to put your cameras back on, and we could have just a little bit of a Q&A. And I noticed for some reason tonight, several people are Kari Gunter-Seymour, not just me. And so is Willie now. So it's so funny that sometimes Zoom takes on these attitude. It's the AI. I'm going to blame the AI. But anyway, so there may be some comments in the chat that were made by others. You may never know who, but it may or may not have been me, you guys. So, but I've noticed they're all good, so it's all good, I think. So did we have any questions in the chat? I'm going to look at that real quick. And I know a lot of people have to go and they're just saying, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question then. And that question would be, because you touched on it in your poetry and in some of the things that you talked about, but I always love to ask this question, just open-ended. Tell me about your people. You want to go first, Willie?
Sure. We just had a remembrance ceremony, a ceremony of life for my aunt. And I was just thinking about how wild and unruly the entire event was. It was beautiful people I've known all my life who, under the lenses that other people might use, might not be seen as the beautiful people that they are. And I think in general, my people are usually people whose dignity isn't readily given to them because their beauty isn't seen. And Robert Guy, I just freaking love Robert Guy. Everything about that man. Yeah, I didn't mean for the answer to be so esoteric, but I love anybody who just speaks plainly and honestly, and also softly. I think sometimes we'll say things like, well, I'm not hateful, but I just say it truthfully. And I'm like, you can say it truthfully and softly. You can say it truthfully in such a loving way. So I don't know if that's the answer, if that's the right question, but those are my people.
I love that. I really do. Katie, what about you?
Well, those people also sound like my people, Willie, I have to say too. But I think people who have a story and are maybe, afraid to tell it or something. That's why I'm so big on sharing poems, because I really want to encourage everyone to make their voice heard and really getting, everybody's story out there. And then, people who love the power of words and how they can bring it together, us together. And then I guess also my people are the people that are trying to make the world better and see the positives and grab onto it and not immerse themselves in a negative spiral, even though there is so much bad stuff, of course, going on in the world. It's holding onto the light and pulling more of it to us, are my people.
Oh, I love that so much from both of you, really. I mean, wow. I'm going to put, again, the links to your books here in the chat, and I'm just going to real quick so that people who watch the recording later can remember that Gay Poems for Red States is at Kentucky Press, University Press, and Hot Pink Moon is on Amazon. What about your first book, Katie? Where's that one available?
It's on my site. It's also an NFT, which I know George Pastana owns, but it's on khdpoet.com for the
Okay.
physical version. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dick just wanted to say a note of appreciation to Willie, how you've nurtured and retained your voice, including the rich music of what some would call your accent. It's just just a gift, I think he meant to the rest of us. So that's so kind of.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Dick. And Chelsea had a question just above it.
I'm so sorry. Thank
No.
you. I'm glad you caught it.
There's
Okay.
so much flowing.
Yep.
I
It
think
says, what is the challenge or barrier you have when writing? Okay.
Dick, thank you, because I think you answered it in a lot of ways, and it's other people's voices. And what I mean is, I think really early on in this process, someone said something along the lines of like, you lack poetic refinement. And I almost let that stop me from doing what I instinctively knew was right. And that doesn't mean we can't learn from lots of things and we can't take in lots of beautiful writing. But I wanted to honor where I came from, and I wanted to write poetry that spoke that spoke in the stories of the people before me. And I think if people are so concerned with a very specific way of approaching writing, sometimes they will take that. I talk about biscuits and gravy. I'd lived in France and made biscuits and gravy for the French. And if you know the French, they're very particular about food. And so everyone's eating it and they all agree it tastes good, but someone's like, this needs il faut de la salade. This needs a salad. And I'm like, what? And then someone else says, yes, that's it, with a heavy Dijon mustard in the vinaigrette. And then someone else says, yes, and this bread, you need a brioche. And then someone else says, yes, and toast it, a toasted brioche. So before I know it, they have completely transformed my biscuits and gravy into what probably would have been something beautiful, but it wasn't biscuits and gravy, and they were missing the point. I think for me, that's my challenge as a writer. It's keeping biscuits and gravy, and learning from other people who are cooking without destroying my biscuits.
Mm-hmm. Well done. Love the metaphors.
I have to say too, I love biscuits and gravy. This is an aside, but I can tell, and we do not need brioche biscuits and gravy. That is for sure. I agree with that. My biggest challenge is definitely having the time to write, with, 2 young daughters and a lot of travel. And the problem is that when I sit down to write, it's always a choice that can feel selfish versus doing, things like working on my podcast or things that are more outward and encouraging other people. Sometimes it's a choice between sending more personalized rejections or getting to write a poem myself. So that's a challenge. And then one other challenge that I'm working towards myself, which is related to the time, is not doing what I call taking the first exit from a poem, staying in the poem longer, which is something that is a struggle, because it really is sometimes, I have maybe 10 minutes or maybe I get interrupted mid-poem. And so it's really finding that time to write and prioritizing it without feeling selfish about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That is so true, isn't it? Wow. Haley, did you have any questions tonight? Sometimes I forget to ask you if you have something. No? Okay. Just one more thing then. Do y'all want to talk about, I know, Willie, you've got a new book coming out. And Katie, it sounds like maybe you and Tim do too, since you've just done another collaboration. So do you just want to remind us again where you'll be publishing those, and maybe ETA of when we could look for them?
Well, Willie has definite plans. I think he should go first.
I've got a book called Tore All to Pieces. We just got some proto covers today, so I'm really excited. But it's a fragmented novel told from various viewpoints, and it takes place in an imaginary town in Eastern Kentucky. And there's also a lot of poetry in it. It's a strange thing. But I think the poetry is sort of like the mist that the stories rise out of. So every story has an accompaniment poem. So that's coming out next March, and I'm really excited. I just finished a Mothman novel. I have not signed with anyone, but I'm really excited about it. I was actually, the day of my aunt's event last Saturday, my heart was like, you got to go to Point Pleasant. Because I knew the character was going there. And so I said to my husband, like, can we go to Point Pleasant? He was like, how many days do I pack for? Let's go. So I had to run around the river to figure out where my character was standing, because I could feel him wanting that. So that is to be seen, but I'm very excited about it.
That is exciting.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I hope the cover somehow is, I don't know how it could be even better than Gay Poems for Red States. I love the cover too.
That was done by, what is her name? Zoe Norvell. And she's absolutely fantastic. And she won an award for this cover. And I have to give her credit. She knew what she was doing, and it's beautiful.
Well, for me, Tim and I do not know exactly what we're doing with our book. I think the next step is agreeing on a title. So that's always fun. Tim's usually better at picking out titles, so we're doing that. But I am very excited because the podcast that I host and that Tim co-hosts, The Poetry Space, we recorded our 100th episode today, which Dick Westheimer is a part of and Joe Barca is a big part of. And George Pistato was on a couple episodes early when we were on Twitter, and I'm really excited about that. That has been, it feels like a real accomplishment to reach the 100th episode, and I think we've covered a lot of important ground. And the episode that comes out tomorrow is going to be part 1 on spirituality. So I came into this in a very spiritual, wonderful place, and was able, I think, to enjoy your reading, Willie, and talking to everybody even more because of it.
Oh, that's beautiful, Katie. Thank you. Thank you both so much. This has just been beyond anything I could have imagined. I mean, in times 1,000. And I know everybody who came tonight feels that way. I can't wait for the recording so we can share it with everyone. So thank you both so much. And I want to thank all who came out this evening to spend this evening with us. And then again, I thank everyone who watched later. Thank you to Sheila-Na-Gig and the Ohio Arts Council. Please buy our guest books. If you didn't listen well tonight, you can find them on my website, KariGunter-Seymourpoet.com, and order them from there. And then I encourage you all to join me in the fall. September 19th, I'll have poets Denton Loving and Ohio's own Scott Woods. October 16th is Jen Karatanek, editor at Swim, and the award-winning novelist Jonathan Kokorin. And November 20th, we have Sarah Moore Wagner and Bunkong Tuan, which I think is just going to be marvelous. So I want y'all to have a beautiful, wonderful summer. Be safe. I'll see you in the fall. So until we meet again, everyone, good night.